the number one thing when it comes to our diet turns out to be the thing that we are missing the most: the consumption of fiber. Fiber is this nutrient that exists in all plant-based foods. Our human body lacks the ability on its own to process and digest fiber. Fiber stays chemically unchanged between your stomach and your large intestine. Then it arrives in the colon, which is where these 38 trillion microorganisms live. And it turns out where we lack the enzymes. Matt, there's estimates that they have 60,000.
We can't even eat our own food unless we have these creatures digesting it for us.
It's very true.
This week on Influence, how one doctor got the guts to get online. Greetings, Internet travelers. Welcome back to Influence with me, Matt Silverman. Thanks for pulling over on the information superhighway for another week here. Thanks for hanging out. It's the show where we talk to creators of all stripes, the people who make us laugh on the internet, the people who share, scientific breakthroughs, or maybe social activism. Maybe it's video game communities. Maybe it's your favorite podcasters, people who entertain us and keep us engaged with the things we're very passionate about. And I got to say, never in the long history of this feed have we ever had a creator, an influencer whose primary focus is, I'm just going to say it, buckle up, constipation, gas. I'm not talking natural gas, the stuff that comes into your stove. I'm talking about the other natural gas. All right. And the little bugs, there's bugs inside your intestines right now, and they are screaming. They are shouting at you. They're saying, "Feed me." And it's disgusting. I don't recommend it. But the gentleman who is on this program today has made his entire career, his entire focus, both IRL, that stands for in real life as a medical doctor, and also on these internets that we love so much. He is, he's a medical doctor. He's a gastroenterologist. I know many of you probably know what that is, but we're going to dig in to unpack exactly what that means technically and scientifically. He is an author. He is an Instagram powerhouse, frequent face and voice on many podcasts, some of the biggest health and wellness podcasts on, dare I say, this planet Earth. And I will say I've had the pleasure of getting to know him in the last month or so. And his advice over the course of a lot of different media outlets has really, really changed the way that I personally think about food and diet and health. And I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today is going to, it's certainly going to educate me. I hope it educates you. Please welcome Dr. Will Bulsiewicz to Influence. Hello, sir. He's pumped. For audio listeners, he's like jumping out of his seat. He's ready. How's it going?
It's great. How are you doing, Matt? Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. It's my pleasure. I've followed your work for some time now, and it's great to have you on the show. The question I ask all my guests to start is, how do you communicate your job? How do you explain what you do for a living? And for you, it's a little bit different than the average influencer content creator, because you are a real actual doctor, but then you're more than that these days. So if you meet a stranger, coffee shop acquaintance, family member, and they say, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" Where does that conversation start?
Yeah, it's become a lot more complicated than it used to be. And I've had to kind of figure this one out, to be totally honest with you. This is one of the most challenging questions that I come across. So, because my lifelong dream was to be a medical doctor. Mm-hmm. And it took me a very long time, 16 years between college, medical school, my training. Yeah.
Okay.
So I was 34
years. Is that normal? What, medical school through residency? What does that timeline typically look like?
Okay. So, let's break this down real quick. So college 4 years, medical school 4 years. Those are standard. So that's a minimum of 8. And then the fastest track you could possibly do would be 3 years beyond that. And that would make you something along the lines of like an internal medicine doctor, a family practitioner, things like this.
Okay.
If you want to be a surgeon, it's typically on the order of 5 years or more. And if you want to be a gastroenterologist, which is what I am, then your medical training, again, this is in addition to the 8 years, is a minimum of 6.
Wow. So, that is so why? Are all specialties like that?
So under the umbrella of internal medicine, there are many different specialties. And there are sort of the classics that we think about: cardiology, gastroenterology, medical oncology. And those all tend to be 3 years of additional training. And then if you want to be even more specialized, you have to add on more time beyond that. Okay. But like there are some things, like, for example, if you want to do sports medicine, it may not be an additional 3 years. If you want to do palliative care, it may not be an additional 3 years. So there are some that are a little bit less, but like, so if you want to be a gastroenterologist, from the time that you start college to the time that you finish without taking any breaks, you're talking about a minimum of 11 years. I'm sorry, hold on. No, a minimum of 14 years. Sorry, the math faded me.
8 plus
8 plus 6. 8 plus 6.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that would put you at like a minimum of 32 years old. Right.
Just starting out your job as a gastro.
Yeah. So I was 34. And the reason why I was 34 and I have an extra 2 is not that I was remediated, but I became the chief medical resident at Northwestern. So I agreed to spend an extra year in a leadership position where I basically was one of a few people that led our internal medicine program of 140 people. And then at the University of North Carolina, where I did my gastroenterology fellowship, I was actually on a grant from the NIH. And my program was very unique because I was both training to be a clinician and simultaneously training to be a clinical researcher.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So I added time for these things that, like, I'll tell you, Matt, we're going to dig into the story in more detail. There have been times where I really said to myself, why did I do that?
Well, because when you start your job, are you going into clinical work or are you going into research? Like, what as you're doing medical school, do you want to research or practice or both?
Right. So as I was going through, I was like, I love patients. Like, this is what inspired me in the first place. This is why I wanted to be a medical doctor, was to take patients, work with them,
to help people,
Right.
Yeah.
And that human connection, like, that's a very important thing for me. Like, I'm a very extroverted person. So, but then there's this other aspect that's like, well, I also want to be a leader in my field. And being a pure clinician doesn't really offer that opportunity.
Yes. You're reminding me of other folks I've talked to, of like, I used to be a teacher of X, but I could only teach, 20 students a week because there's only so many hours in a day. But as a researcher, and as we're going to discuss, as a science communicator, you can reach your work can have impact on hundreds, tens of thousands, through that work.
Yeah. I mean, like, I have many podcast episodes that have been reaching millions. And so, and so to me, as I sat there, and again, I'm in my, like, late 20s, early 30s, I'm still trying to figure out who I am as a person during this phase. And there was a part of me that said, look, the door is open. The opportunity is there, that if I want to become a leader within this field of gastroenterology, I can do that. And this is the way that I would do that. But anyway, the original question that you asked me, Matt, was how do I answer, like, what do you do?
Yeah.
And it used to be a simple, well, I'm a medical doctor.
I'm a doctor.
Yeah. And now what it's become is actually the easiest way is for me to say I'm an author.
That's so many folks who come on here just say that because it's a shorthand of like, I've written a book, but listeners here know, like, that is deeply connected to things that you've built on the internet.
Right.
So
it just sort of sets up what comes after that, because then by saying I'm an author, then I can like very easily be like, well, my background is that I'm a gastroenterologist and I write about gut health, and and I do podcasts, and so it starts to sort of the dominoes start falling after that. But I think for the person who's asked you a simple question and opened up a can of worms without realizing it, the easiest way to gently ease them into the response of what I do is to start with, I'm an author.
Yep. That makes sense. Makes sense to most people. And then others have said like, oh, it depends who's asking, and it depends what follow-up questions are they interested in learning more, or are they like, oh, cool, and then they walk away, whatever the context is, right?
Yeah, I don't want to overburden them with what I
do. So I am so fascinated by anyone who specializes in anything hyper specific, but like, hey, I went to medical school and now I'm a foot doctor. Like I just do the feet, or I just do the eyes. What in God's name drew you to colons and intestines? Like, how did you come into this world?
Well, Matt, this is the exact same question that my mother-in-law was asking the first time I met her. Who is this man that my daughter has brought home, and why is he into colons and rectums? And it took me a little while to warm her up to who I am as a person, not just a colon and rectum person. But anyway, okay, so the way that you framed this is kind of interesting to me, because you framed it as being hyper-specific. And that is, in fact, the way that most of medicine has gone, which is that through specialization, you the body is too complex.
Yeah.
It's far too overwhelming. Even so far, ChatGPT is unable to handle the complexities of the body.
Interesting.
Right. It's coming along and making great progress, but it's not there yet.
Meaning, if ChatGPT scrapes the entire body of scientific and medical literature, it still has trouble generating accurate medical answers?
If you ask ChatGPT to answer a question and provide a reference, and then you actually check the reference, there's a certainly more than 50%. Like in my experience, in many cases, 95% chance, because I'm asking specific questions.
Yeah.
There's a 95% chance that the reference will not match what ChatGPT is actually saying.
And I wonder, that's a whole topic for another show. I wonder if that's specific to medical literature in terms of its structure or paywallness or whatever, or if that is indicative of ChatGPT with any specialized topic.
That's a great question. I'm not sure.
That's a curious thing.
It struggles with that kind of thing. I do think they'll fix that, but
for sure.
Anyway, nonetheless, so medicine, like what we've done is, because the body is so complicated, and because, frankly, scientific research has like really, blossomed in the last 30, 40 years. Like we went from a place of like, we don't even have a field called epidemiology until Ansel Keys in 1950, right? That didn't even exist, to now, like there's, at least hundreds, if not thousands of new epidemiology studies published on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Right. So to really be able to keep your pulse on what's happening within medicine, we have created specialization. There's specialization as a researcher, where you pick one specific thing and you own it, right? And there's specialization clinically, where you become an expert on a specific topic. Now, here's where I was like I found it a little bit curious and interesting the way that you framed it. That is 100% true if you're a cardiologist, right? You think about this one organ that squeezes. It's just one muscle. It squeezes, 60 to 100 times a minute. Right. And you spend your entire life thinking about that one muscle that's perpetually squeezing, and how do we protect it and make it better? Whereas as a gastroenterologist, I am considered the expert on the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestine, the colon,
it goes
the rectum,
it's top to bottom,
the liver, the pancreas. And these are diverse organs. They're all unique. Like, I could totally imagine where to people, the small intestine, the colon, they're very similar. Okay, I get that. Like there are some similarities there. But like the liver, the pancreas, these are very unique, interesting organs. And I get to be the expert on all of them. So
truly, cool. As a layperson, I didn't even realize that liver and pancreas were in the in your wheelhouse. Truly,
Absolutely.
That's news to me. I'm already learning plenty.
Yeah, so I'm the same guy that gets called for someone who comes in with their liver function tests are through the roof. What's going on? Okay, let's call in Dr. B. And I'm also the guy that we have someone who's bleeding from their intestines. It's an emergency. We need someone to come in the middle of the night and save their life.
Right.
That would also be someone like me. So, and the choice happened for me around 2005 when I was in my third year of medical school. At the time, I was 25 years old. So just to frame,
just to frame this, you knew you wanted to be a doctor, and you were already in medical school, but you had not quite focused on gastro yet.
Right. So the process is that you have to decide very early if you want to go to medical school, because you have to go through these weed out classes. So I went to Vanderbilt for undergrad. And there's 4 main weed out classes: chemistry, organic chemistry, physics, and biology.
Okay.
And you get 1 semester of each. So basically there's 8 semesters total. All right. During each of these semesters, they grade you on a curve. So the average in the class is a B-. If you don't get at least a B+ on every single one of those, you're done.
Meaning you are not eligible to proceed to.
You're not going to get into medical school.
Yeah. Okay.
It's that competitive. That basically, like, if you're not at least a B+ in every single one, you really need to be A- and A's on almost all. So, anyway, you know what?
No, the inflection point. Like, so you're in the thick of this, and then what? How did you discover?
Right. So you have to go into college basically like planning this, and so as I was going through, I was like, okay, I want to be a medical doctor. I went through pre-med at Vanderbilt. I was a chemistry major. That was my focus, and then I went into medical school, and I actually thought I wanted to be a pediatrician.
Okay,
that was my plan. And the first 2 years of medical school, you're actually in classes. And then the third year, you step into the hospital for the first time. And it's kind of fun, actually. Because, like, for example, I got to do 4 weeks of OBGYN. I knew I was not going to be delivering babies for a living. So delivering babies was kind of fun for me. I got to do that.
You get to sample all these areas. Yeah,
exactly. So, and I think that sampling process, you start to discover who you actually are.
That makes a ton of sense. Yeah.
And so what I found was that I loved the some complexity of medical care, which is really what that means is, like, you have a patient, they have a list of problems. You identify that list of problems, those are diagnoses, and then you create a plan for every single one of those. And it can be layers of an onion, right? So that's like complex, and it's also it's like purely intellectual.
Yeah.
But then the flip side was, like, sometimes it's very fun and satisfying to fix things with your hands. That's what surgeons do. Right. And so I kind of liked both. So what is the watershed between these two things that exist? There's actually not many fields in medicine where you can do both.
Okay.
Gastroenterology is the field within internal medicine that allows you to be 50% in the clinic with patients and then 50% using your hands.
All right. Dr. B, where are you putting these hands? All right.
Oh, dear. What have I stepped into?
We got him.
Yeah. Well, so what we do is we perform endoscopy. So endoscopy includes colonoscopy, upper endoscopy. I also trained in some specialized procedures, like one called ERCP, which is for going up into the liver, into the bile ducts.
Wow. Okay.
But it's conceptually similar to, I'm like trying to decide on the fly, like, do I even say this? But I'm just going to say it. So it's conceptually similar to playing video games.
Okay, great.
So you basically
because you're controlling the camera.
You have a device, and it's attached to a very long fiber optic camera. That the intensity of the camera quality, like basically these devices are made by Olympus,
Right.
There's a reason why. They make great cameras, and that's what you need here. You need a great camera.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? So, and you can like literally see these microscopic things that honestly are quite beautiful inside the body.
Amazing. Yeah. I get it. Yeah. I came into this being like, okay, how did you find your way to this? And now, as we're talking about it, of course, it's like, all right, this makes a lot of sense. So, so when you finish school, are you working primarily as a clinician, or you are splitting your time between clinic and research?
Okay, so there was this really complex period of time in my life where there was a lot going on. And part of it, like there were some personal things for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And also there was, I talk about this in my books, that like I wasn't well from a health perspective. So I was about 50 pounds overweight. I had high blood pressure, high cholesterol, was anxious and depressed, and I had very low self-esteem, even though my career was really taking off. All right. So and the period of time that we're talking about is like roughly from like 28 to 32 here. Okay. Or maybe actually 28 to 34. And the last part that was like complex is like I'm sort of having a early life career crisis because I had worked so hard.
Yeah.
To put myself in the position where I could be an academic researcher. But the problem was that sitting on a laptop all day without human interaction was actually really hard for me.
Yeah.
Because I like people.
Yeah.
And I loved when I would get to leave that and go into the clinic and be with patients.
Okay.
So I made a decision. It was a hard decision because basically I had to sit there and like accept that I had put, I'm not exaggerating when I say at least hundreds of hours.
Yeah.
Probably a lot more than that. I got a master's degree. I got a master's degree at night at Northwestern. I spent a year as the chief medical resident. I did this grant thing with the NIH, all this. And I basically was making the decision, I'm going to just throw that to the side.
It's such an investment. And I think a lot about this with life and kids and everything of like hyper specializing only works for certain people in certain fields. And I do hear stories. There's a gentleman, I believe it's David Epstein, and he's a journalist, and he wrote about sports figures. And he wrote a book called Range, and it's about how people who specialize so deeply often lose their way in life, because when that thing peters out or turns around on them, they have no other skills, and it has a deep effect on their self-esteem. And he's advocating for kids to do all the sports, do all the activities, anyway, it just makes me think about that. I cannot imagine going to school for, as you said, 16 years and then being like, wait, what am I doing? Like that is so terrifying to me.
Well, and I think like the tricky part for me was to say, hey, like psychologically, emotionally, you have put in this tremendous effort, night school, all this stuff, and you're just going to walk away and become a clinician. But that's the choice that I made, because I knew that for me, my happiness was with people and trying to like help them to navigate towards health outcomes.
So you're working as a clinician for some period of time, and then when do you start thinking about getting online? Meaning, like, do you have a personal online presence like Facebook, Instagram, and then at what point are you starting to share medical information, and why do you start doing that?
So I left. I finished my training in 2014. And I took a job in Savannah, Georgia, in private practice. And I was there for about 2 years. Now, we must acknowledge, like my wife, she's a native Charlestonian. Like she grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, which is where we live. And Savannah is about 2 hours south of here in Charleston, where we live now. So on the weekends, my wife would drive up to Charleston. And it became clear to me, like, this is where I need to be. It's a competitive landscape. It's not easy to get a job in Charleston. And so I was able to get a job, and that made me very motivated to define myself.
Okay.
Working on a person's nutrition and things that are considered outside the box, like non-traditional. And when I say non-traditional, like I'm not talking about acupuncture, although I have no problem with acupuncture.
Right. Just and I'll set the stage for listeners as well. I am not a fan of woo-woo stuff. I am not a fan of like alternative medicine. Like I like it. None of what Will does and what we're talking about is even on that scale. All of this is science-based and peer-reviewed, and all the stuff we're going to talk about today. So just putting that out there.
Yeah, like I focus on nutrition, which to me is completely logical, and it's shocking to me that gastroenterologists don't do this.
Right.
Because every single person who walks through those doors, almost all of them, they come through and they say, food hurts me. Right. And so it would seem that as a medical doctor, like remedying that issue and understanding that issue is like at the core of trying to achieve better health for your patient.
Yes. And so much of why your work resonates, I think, is because we lay people and culturally think of medicine as like, this is wrong. How do I fix this issue? But your work is often focused on, if we think holistically about nutrition and gut, we will have better outcome. We will not encounter these problems to fix later. It's preventative medicine. Obviously,
it's preventative medicine, but also for people that have a disease or something that they're struggling with.
Right.
If you don't address the root of the issue, then that disease gets worse. Right. So ultimately, to me, like the root of the issue is never the absence of a pill. Right. The root of the issue is that there's something more complex going on.
Right.
And I think that like blaming it all on genetics is a cop-out. Right? Because that basically says you were born this way. You have no control over your health. There's nothing you can do. I don't agree with that. So from 2014 to 2016, when I was in Savannah, Georgia, I was working on an approach focused on nutrition, because in my own life, around 2014, I had a major breakthrough in my own health where like I was struggling with these health issues that I mentioned a moment ago. And I didn't want my own medicine as a medical doctor.
Okay.
I wanted to address the root of the issue as opposed to taking 5 pills for 5 problems.
Okay.
And so what I did is I changed, like there's an entire story there and I won't belabor the point, but suffice it to say, it started with exercise, but exercise alone was not enough. And so then I changed my diet and that changed my life. And when you experience that firsthand as a medical doctor, then like as someone who I would imagine that your listeners can appreciate, I care deeply about wanting to help my patients. And so when that happened, okay, of course I have to bring this into the clinic. And it doesn't matter what barriers exist because this is the right thing to do.
Yep. And
so I did that from 2014 to 2016. And then I took a job in Charleston, South Carolina. So now we're moving back to my wife's hometown. And I've learned so much in these last 2 years of working with patients on their irritable bowel syndrome, their constipation, their inflammatory bowel disease, their acid reflux, and seeing amazing transformations that are occurring in the clinic. But the problem is like it's behind a closed door. So it's just me and my patient, and I'm seeing what's happening in their life. To me, that's a story that needs to be shared more broadly.
Got it. Yep.
And so I came to Charleston, and originally I reached out to a local newspaper that my father-in-law had connections to. I reached out to the editor, and I just to frame this, like Charleston has a really prestigious newspaper called the Post and Courier. That's a Pulitzer Prize winning paper. That's not who I'm talking about. Okay. I'm talking about the completely free paper that everyone gets in their mailbox.
Okay.
And so I reached out to them and I said, hey, I would love to write a health and wellness column for you. Here's 5 essays that I've written. Right? This is what it would look like. if you create space, I'll do this for free.
Right.
And they were just like, no.
Really?
Not interested at all. Zero interest, no entertainment.
Yeah, and there could be a million reasons for that, of like they don't want to make the space, or they don't want to vet you, or they think they would owe you something, or it's like, hey, here's a guy who wants to work for free. That seems dicey or strange. Who knows? Creepy, right?
Well, so they weren't interested at all. So I sat there and, I was disappointed. And my wife says, look, the people that you're trying to reach are out there.
Yeah.
Why don't you just take this and put it on social media?
Right. And again, what year are we talking? Where are we?
2016.
2016. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So modern social media is kicking off, web 2.5, let's call it, whatever we want to say.
Yeah. Like Instagram is starting to pick up.
It's starting to pick up.
Yeah. Facebook is probably peaked and I'm starting to slightly decline. Right. So I went on Instagram and started sharing this. And to be totally honest with you, Matt, like I had to really, really, really want to do this because this was basically like working my tail off as a doctor full time.
Right.
Come home at night.
Mm-hmm.
I have kids. Mm-hmm. So at this point in my life, I have 2 kids who are between the ages of 0 and 2. And, and 8 o'clock at night, when I want to unwind and relax, I was typing up on my phone Instagram posts, putting them out to the world, and it was very slow. For
You're
2
getting
years.
almost no traction. At this time, you have an Instagram that is just like, hey, friends and family. It's like a personal account. Like what is the starting line for you at this time?
Well, I mean, I guess, sometimes I look at other people, and not in any negative way, but I look and I observe, and I notice that they start an account and I don't know what they're doing, but whatever they're doing, it clicks. And they instantly get 10, 20, 30,000 followers. It happens real fast.
Yeah.
Right. That's not what happened with me.
There are algorithmic games you can play these days if you really know what you're doing, or if you hire someone or an agency to do that stuff, and that's fine, but it has its pros and cons, I suppose.
Well, so I was by myself. It was me and my phone. and no budget. Like, if anything, it was just expenses. I certainly was not making any money.
Right.
And I was posting, and it took me about a year to get to 1,000 followers.
Okay. Wow.
And then in year 2, I was about 3,500. Mm-hmm. And so there's growth, but it's slow.
And what type of content are we talking? Are these little video reels? Are they picture posts, text posts?
You could go back. It's I haven't taken anything down, so you could go back and see like the simplicity of where it all started. And a lot of times it was like me taking a picture of what I was eating.
Oh yeah, okay.
And then just talking about it.
Great.
And then I eventually graduated to, I got a Canva account, and I created a template. Yeah, I created a template that looks like Twitter. And the funny thing about it is I don't have a Twitter account.
So you're creating what looks like screenshots of tweets.
Exactly.
Funny.
But I didn't have a Twitter account. So it's kind of funny because it's like just a total simulation.
That's great.
But no one knew.
Yeah.
And it was just a great way actually to disseminate information back then.
Isn't that fascinating that showing a screenshot of another social network somehow elevates or makes the message more interesting or more important, quote unquote? I'm using air quotes.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating.
I think there's algorithmic elements in that, to be honest with you. So because, for example, Instagram was feeling the pinch because TikTok was taken off.
Right, exactly.
So all of a sudden the algorithm massively shifted.
Yeah.
And they went towards, Reels, which Reels are basically TikToks.
Yes.
So like what I was doing actually stopped working once they did that.
Yep, totally.
Yeah. Totally. So I think like during this time, I think that like Instagram was like, who's our competition? Oh, it's Twitter.
Yes.
All right. So let's take these tweets and like, let's make people want to come here for their tweets as opposed to Twitter. Mm-hmm. So anyway, And so during this time, like it's slow growth and it's a lot of effort. But there were some things that did occur.
Yeah.
That let me know that there was something there.
Mm-hmm.
So I was invited by the local hospital system to give a talk.
Mm-hmm.
This was 6 months after I arrived in Charleston.
Okay.
And they said, we'll advertise it. And they said, just FYI, like this is a lunchtime talk on like a Tuesday at a hospital. You got to drive to the hospital. We're not serving any food. And they're like, typically we have 15 people, 10 to 15 people is what we have.
These are other doctors or this is the public?
So this is open to the public.
Okay.
Right. And they'll advertise it through their network. And they're basically like asking clinicians, like doctors within their health system to come forward and talk about stuff that they find interesting.
Okay.
All right. So
they're expecting like 15 old ladies to show up?
10 to 15 old ladies who are clearly retired because who else has time on a Tuesday at noon? And also
no disrespect to you beautiful old ladies out there, but we love you.
I love them. But yeah, but we're not going to serve any food. So like BYOL.
Bring a lunch. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, they started advertising this event and they're like, oh my goodness. They're like, we have 35 people. And then as the date gets closer, oh my goodness, like we need to get more chairs. We have 50 people. And they're like, oh my goodness. They're like, we're at maximum capacity. The room can only hold 70 people.
Huh.
So we're shutting this down. You're sold out. I'm like,
and
cool.
This was just like, here's a guy you don't know talking about gut health.
Yeah.
What was the pitch for this? You know what I mean? What is drawing these people in? Because it's not you're not known yet in this world.
No.
Okay.
No, I'm not. No, this is. Hey, here's our new doctor, and he's going to talk about the gut microbiome and how this is relevant to your health.
I mean,
and I literally still have the slide deck, and I have the video, and there's a little bit of a story behind the video. Like I'll tell you about this. So they're like, we're sold out, 70 people, we can't handle any more. All right. I show up the day of the event, Matt. There were another 40 people who showed up without RSVPing.
Oh, wow.
Fire code thrown out the window. Standing room only. The room was completely packed. All right. People are standing in the back. We have 110 people. Again, this is 10 times what they expected. And so I give this talk. And I actually paid a videographer because, again, like I've started my Instagram account at this point. So my thought is like, maybe I can take this video and like slice out pieces.
Yeah, you got it. So you're doing so much work to give a talk. You got to repurpose it and get that value back some other way too. It's
so I paid a videographer to come and like shoot this for me. And the response was so powerful because like literally my office could tell the minute that I was done talking because the phone lines got flooded with people calling for appointments. And a line formed of people who wanted to come and talk to me. And there were people, I'm not exaggerating when I say this, who waited for 2 hours.
Wow.
To come and talk to me and ask a question.
But did you ever so I have no doubt that once you gave the talk, people were lining up to learn more. But I am just can't help but wonder, like, that pitch for the event was so simple and like, why would people even be aware that gut health was important until they heard from you or met you? Why the sellout crowd? I
think my theory would be that this is like kind of we're talking about 2017, January of 2017 right now.
Okay.
This is quite early days for this movement of gut health.
Yeah.
So there are health conscious people who monitor the local hospital system newsletter. Right? Like you're only going to be monitoring that newsletter if you care about your health. That's a thing?
Okay.
Yeah. Right?
Huh.
And so those are the ones on this distribution sort of marketing channel. And they hear, hey, this new topic that we're just starting to hear about, there's a doctor who wants to talk to us about this.
Okay. So this is the equivalent to the people who line up at the Apple store for the latest, greatest iPhone. They're on the cutting edge of their interest.
Yes.
And so this is the 1% of the 1%, but they all turned out. Who the heck is on a hospital newsletter aside from like I was a patient and I gave my email to somebody?
Right.
Fascinating.
Why would you pay attention to the local health system unless you actually were very interested in this particular type of?
So you found these hyper interested people, and the internet there thusly is about hyper interest as well. So
Right.
you're lining up the ducks here.
Yeah. So they showed up, and this event, like, it knocked my socks off. And this is part of what propelled me, that even when it was slow days and people are not really paying attention to what I'm putting on Instagram, right? It's what propelled me to say, I got to keep going. And the other thing that happened is this video, I've literally never shared it because I felt like there's something there. And I don't know what this will become. But what I do know is that if I put this out there publicly right now, it is no longer mine.
Yeah.
And so I felt that it would be best for me to protect this sort of like, because this is not an Instagram post. This is not a micro content. This is my big picture thesis.
Yeah.
And so let me protect my thesis so that it remains my own.
And do you still think that way, or are you saying that was sort of like a erroneous way to think about that?
No, I think so. I think it was actually an instinct that paid off.
Okay.
Because we'll get to this, but you asked me, what do you do for a living? And I said, I'm an author. Okay. How did I become an author? Well, there's a little bit more to the story before we get there. But suffice it to say that what I presented in January of 2017, if I showed you the slide deck, if I showed you the video, and you put that right next to my book, Fiber Fueled, which has sold 350,000 copies, you would see that it's like a massively clear translation.
Yes. Yes. Right? And this is a really interesting calculation that creators have to think about a lot of, like, if you give away the whole farm, some creators put it all out there. They give everything away because they make their living from a large audience, advertising, community, or some other product that is connected to. So the content itself the knowledge is out there. But for you, it's you. If anyone listens to Will's podcast, the podcast that he's on, or subscribe to him, you're going to get tons of information. But the core of it, the core thesis, is richer and more nuanced, and that's going to be a talk or a book.
Yeah, if you want the full story arc. Exactly. If you want the full story arc, that's what you ultimately, like, if you want to hear that all sort of unpacked in a nuanced way, you need that, right? So whereas like these other outlets, podcast or Instagram, these are snippets.
Yep.
Right.
So you hold the big stuff in reserve, but then but you're onto something here. So what do you start putting on Instagram after this moment, this revelation?
It's content from within the talk, but it's not the talk itself.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's also not the whole thesis.
Yes.
Right. So you can get these little pieces, but it'd be quite hard to get the pieces, and you'd have to spend a lot of time looking at Instagram content to figure out, like, what is the thesis here that connects all these dots.
And then 2 years to get to 3,500.
Yep. So then summer of 2018. So that was January 2017. Okay. And at that time I have 350 followers, January 2017.
Yep.
By the summer of 2017, I had 1,000 followers. By the summer of May of 2018, I have 3,500 followers. And then what I started doing is I got a microphone and I would go on people's podcasts.
Yeah.
And these were very small podcasts in the beginning. But it was an opportunity to share this story. So I go on a podcast. There's a bit of a backstory here. So just to set this up, it's June of 2018. All right. I finished my training in 2014. So I've been a medical doctor for 4 years. Most people don't realize young doctors are financially strapped. Okay. So we were living paycheck to paycheck. And because you have my medical education from Georgetown alone is a mortgage.
Yeah.
And then I have a mortgage, right?
2 kids.
And then I have kids and a family and routine family expenses, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all these things. And so I was invited to go down to Savannah, Georgia by a pharmaceutical company to give a talk about pancreatic insufficiency, so a pancreas issue.
Okay.
And the compensation was profound, like difference making for our family. So they were going to pay me thousands of dollars per thing. And it was like, we're going to do a breakfast, we're going to do a lunch, you're going to do a talk at night. And it's like, okay, so this all adds up to like, let's call it, I don't remember the exact number, but let's call it $6,500.
And how did they find you? Like, how did they zero in on you as a speaker?
So this is actually quite like culturally normal in healthcare, which is that they will find sort of like trusted sources within communities. So the pharmaceutical industry will connect with the trusted sources within communities, and then bring them on as a speaker. And so you're not necessarily like a national speaker, but within your sort of geographic region, people who know you and they trust you and will show up to listen to you. You do that. And it's not necessarily like, there was never anything like, hey, you are required to promote our product. Right. Like, it's not like that.
No strings. Yeah.
That being said, like, obviously I can't get up just talk about, like, I'm sponsored by a pharmaceutical company who brought me in to talk. I can't get up there and say their product stinks.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have gotten myself into that situation in the first place. I would have never agreed to do it if I thought their product stinks. But anyway, I am supposed to make $6,500. And at the very last minute, 72 hours before I'm going to Savannah, they cancel on me.
Oh.
And it hurts because we're paycheck to paycheck. And I had already plotted out, here's what we're going to do with this money for our family.
Yeah.
And so my wife and I, we have one of these like moments where I'm feeling a little bit down and my wife is trying to lift me up.
Yeah.
And I was scheduled to go on this podcast. And it was a brand new podcast with a guy who has about 100,000 followers. And it was called Plant Proof. Okay. So, and like, he's only released 10 episodes so far. So I'm scheduled to go on. My wife says to me, you never know what might happen here.
She's right.
And maybe this thing that hurts and is disappointing turns out to be the thing that changes your life in a beneficial way. And so anyway, I go on this podcast, the Plant Proof. It ends up going viral.
Yeah.
And completely explodes. The person who I have veiled who he is until now, his name is Simon Hill. All right. And so Simon Hill is like now the host of one of the biggest health and wellness podcasts called The Proof. The Proof like really came up as a result of what he and I did together. But simultaneously, I came up because of this episode that went viral. I went within weeks from 5,000 to 25,000 followers.
Yeah.
And I said to my wife, once again, like, there's something here.
People are hungry, no pun intended, slightly intended. People are hungry for this knowledge. They didn't know they needed it. And somehow algorithmically and through sharing and connecting and communities, it is starting to be like, I need this this is actually going to change how I think about things. And people are attaching themselves to it and to you.
And they're telling their friends.
And him.
Yeah. And they're telling their friends, which is what creates that virality.
Yeah.
And so it was like, okay, do I just like keep podcasting?
Right.
Or do I try to like take this lightning and bottle it up? And my wife says to me, well, I 6 months ago prepared a list of literary agents, and here are the ones that I think you should contact with this idea. So she has a list of 10. She
did this on her own, and then said, "Here you go.
Here it is.
Man,
here's the list." She's like, and she is a master. Like she would be a great CIA agent.
Give her a raise. What does she do for a living? Did you meet like in the medical world, or what's the backstory there? Briefly?
No, we actually met through eHarmony.
Ah, great.
So, it's great. I literally might donate money to them. All right. So, because they changed my life. I mean, this is the most important thing that happened. And
But is she like a marketer by trade, or what's her background?
She's just a smart person. And
yeah. Okay. Great.
Smart person, thinks things through, and compliments me in ways that are clearly good for both of us. So, anyway, my wife, she now has transitioned into like we have 4 kids. Mm-hmm. She's a homeschool mom. We homeschool our kids. Mm-hmm. She takes care of the house and like holds down the fort. So like, and my kids have a million activities. I mean, they're
right.
Homeschooled, they're barely home.
That's a lot. That's a lot. It's too many.
So anyway, so she says like, here's the list. And suffice to say, there's also, of course, a story of like getting a book deal.
Right.
But from August of 2018, so the podcast episode came out mid-July. Okay. And then beginning like about 4 weeks later, I started working on this concept of writing a book.
Okay.
And I had no advantages. I didn't have anyone to introduce me to literary agents. So I had to basically kick the tires the old fashioned way. Mm-hmm. And, but suffice it to say that this ultimately led me to getting a literary agent and pitching the major publishers, and then subsequently getting a book deal with Penguin Random House, specifically Avery, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House that focuses on health and wellness.
Got it.
So that was in November of 2018 when that happened.
And you've got I assume that conversation included like, hey, maybe I'm not like super internet famous yet, but like I did these 3 things and holy cow, this blew up. People are craving this, right? Like people want this. If we can put it into book form and market it through social, we've got something, right?
Yeah. So for people who are interested in this topic, if you want to write a fiction book, if you're J.K. Rowling, you have to actually write the book because they want to read the whole thing.
Okay.
But if you're a nonfiction author, such as myself, then what you do is you create a book proposal.
Okay.
And the proposal is a 30 to 40 page document that's basically a business plan for the book. And it will outline all these things that you're describing. Here's the argument for my book. Here's why I'm the expert and the right person to write this book, right? Here's what this is going to be about. Here's who I'm going to sell it to and market it to. And here's who's going to help me. All that. And so, yes, I went from 5,000 to 25,000 followers. It's still very small.
Yep.
And I had literary agents that said, come back and talk to me when you have 300,000 followers.
Just I get it, but it's also like, I don't know. These metrics are all, as you alluded to earlier, platforms change, social media evolves, like the number on the account may or may not be relevant. It's a poor indicator of whether or not people are engaged with your work. You know what I mean?
So to me, the quality of an author is not correlated to the number of followers that you have on social media in any way.
You said it better than I just
because they're just not, they're quite mutually exclusive skills.
Right.
One is to create like snippets that pop and hack the algorithm.
Right.
And the other is to write long form with narrative prose in a way that brings a person in, keeps them interested, and simultaneously gives them a payoff at the end where they're like, this is worth it.
Right. But the publisher's looking at it as a marketing tool, not necessarily as like, oh, you make Instagram so you can write a book. I imagine those are...
They definitely do.
There's a lot of
They definitely do. They absolutely do. There's no doubt that if you have 1 million followers, they'll give you a book deal. Seriously. They will because they know that there's enough people that the book will at least be modestly successful.
Sure. Or
based upon the number of followers alone.
Yeah.
So, you have to understand in their world, they publish 10 books and 9 of them flop.
Yeah. It's a spread. It's an investment game, like a lot of these things.
Exactly.
All right. We have more to discuss. We have to take a break. You're good to keep going. I have more questions about your trajectory here. We have more to discuss.
Yeah.
All right. Before we take a break, listeners know we must do our court-mandated trivia segment where I try to stump every single guest with a multiple-choice trivia question tangentially related to your field of expertise. Are you prepared? Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I'm speaking to Will, not to the audience.
Okay, I'm ready. Let's go.
Speaking of intestines, I was interested to learn that cow intestines, I know you're vegan, so, earmuffs. Cow intestines are traditionally used to encase sausages, but were also used for engineering purposes and were integral to the early design of a specific vehicle. Which of these is the real use of cow intestines to build or improve a human vehicle? One of these is real. The other two I made up. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
This is wild.
Choice A. In 1792, the Count of Siverac, hopefully I'm saying that right, a French word, demonstrated a contraption at the Royal Palace in France, which consisted of 2 wheels and a seat on a wooden frame, what we know today as a bicycle. The Celerifere, sorry everyone, sorry to all French listeners, could not be steered, and you had to lean to the left or right to change direction. The key to its design were the wooden wheels, which were encased in cow intestines, which gave these proto-tires more traction and a rubbery feel. That is choice A.
Okay.
Or is it choice B? In the early 1900s, engineers of German Zeppelins, airships, used cow intestines to make gas cells that line the rib cage of these massive blimps. These cells hold the buoyant hydrogen gas, which allows the blimps to float. So cow intestine balloons that float the Zeppelins in the early 1900s. That is choice B. Or is it choice C? Ancient Phoenician sailors establishing trade routes across the Mediterranean around 650 BCE were getting pretty tired of salt water eating away at the hemp ropes that controlled their masts and sails. According to a stone tablet discovered by Lebanese archaeologists in 1991, some enterprising sailors figured out that wrapping your ropes in cow intestines prevented their erosion from salt water, allowing ships to make much longer voyages with fewer supplies. That is choice C. So, to recap, a proto-bicycle in the 1700s, Zeppelins in the early 1900s, or ancient ropes with Phoenician sailors. Which of these is the real use of cow intestines?
I was never that great at multiple choice questions, but I'm going to eliminate choice B right off the bat. Okay. I don't think that's what it is. It doesn't make sense to me, nor would that. Like, that's a lot of intestines that you're piecemealing together. It sounds kind of gross.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, that's like a horror movie right there. So that leaves me with choices A and C. So then it comes down to, okay, am I more prone to believe that they're inflating cow intestines like a wheel on a bicycle? Where when I do colonoscopy, part of what I do is I inflate human intestines and I can see what's possible there. Do I think that you could really inflate them to a point that they're like a flotation device? Yes. Do I believe that you could inflate them to the point that you could actually have a person sitting on a bike and ride that bike and pedal it? The answer is no. The answer is no. That leaves me with C, and this actually seems like a reasonable choice to me, that you could use the cow intestines for that purpose. How did I do?
I love the rationale. I love the analysis. We will find out if Will is correct right after this break. Oh, it's that time again. Time to thank all the people who make the show possible, all the Patreon supporters at any level, free tier, $1 or $5, those producer level folks. And they get their names shared on every episode of the show. Starting last episode actually, but starting now. They are Sam, Robert Tortorelli, Jolene, Jula, or Jula, Evan, and of course, the legacy tier members who have been supporting the show for, I'm going to say, thousands of years. They are Duran, William, Dominic Kerr, and of course, Bowie Barks. You know them, you love them. Thanks to everyone who supports the show, who keeps the lights on. I appreciate your ears and your contributions. And now it is time to see if Will got the trivia question correct. We're back with Dr. Will Bulsiewicz, gastroenterologist, doctor, MD, and internet and Instagram influencer. At the time of this recording, last I checked, 600K on Instagram, right?
Yeah, something-ish. A little north
we
of
just
600.
said, we just said followers may or may not. Your mileage may vary depending on followers, but clearly the growth from this very slow growth in the early days to now, appearing on some of the most popular and prestigious medical podcasts, you are well known in your field. So we're happy to have you here. Before we went to break, we asked Dr. Will, what is the real use of cow intestines in ancient or old-timey transportation? The choices were A, an early bicycle from the 1700s, B, sacks, cells inside of Zeppelins, German Zeppelins, or C, making those ropes more weather resistant for Phoenician sailors in the BC times. Will immediately ruled out B and reasoned his way away from A to focus on choice C, the most plausible answer. I always give guests a chance to change their answer. Have you reconsidered since the break?
No, I think that my logic remains. I'm not wavering in the logic, so I'm sticking with it. I will say this is the most bizarre question I've ever received in the hundreds of podcasts that I've done, Matt. So I have to credit you for that.
We did it. We got it. All right. I regret to inform you that the correct answer is choice B.
What?
The gas cells, this is from a variety of sources, specifically the New Yorker magazine, which did a whole very long essay on the technology behind early blimps and Zeppelins. The gas
when
cells
did this become a thing?
Wait, there's more. Gas cells of early Zeppelins were made from so-called gold beater's skin, cow intestines beaten to a pulp and then stretched to create cells that they put the hydrogen in, and they put these cells inside the blimp, and that would raise the blimp. Now, this was, you alluded to this, like, wow, wouldn't that be so much work and wouldn't that be so many cow intestines? Guess how many cows it took to make one blimp?
Oh my goodness. Those Zeppelins were huge. Yeah. I'm going to go 2,500.
250,000 cows.
Whoa.
To make one airship.
I feel like you're trolling me right now.
I wish I was. What I will say is I don't think this technology lasted long because... so this is interesting. During the First World War, which is when Germany was producing these early Zeppelins, they stopped. The government was like, please stop making sausages. We need these intestines for blimps. So sausage production ceased.
No brats for you.
And so, but then advances in fabric manufacturing technology, including in 1839. So this is earlier, but I think it took a while for the tech to catch up. Vulcanized rubber, which was created by the American merchant Charles Goodyear, which you certainly know from Goodyear tires.
Yeah.
That changed the game. And so vulcanized rubber allowed these cells to be manufactured synthetically, I guess, and rather than from cow intestines. And I think probably by World War II, these types of blimps and such were not using cow parts to float.
Well, they also realized that they'd have a true mutiny if they asked their people once again to give up their sausages.
To give up sausage? Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So I find that very interesting. Speaking of intestines, these days, you've brought us to your journey now as an author and as a content creator and as a podcast, a frequent podcast guest. What does your content calendar look like these days? What are you producing? And also, I learned recently that you are no longer practicing. You've done another transition yet again in your life and career where you're no longer in the clinic. You're focusing full time on writing books and producing content. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So basically this story that we've discussed today leads up to me getting a book deal.
Yeah.
And I spend the next year at 5 a.m. at a coffee shop writing this book. And like this, because it's the only time that I have is wake up early, go to bed early, wake up early, and spend 2.5 hours each day
before you get to work.
Before I get to work, and then also weekends as well. And so the book comes out in May of 2020. It's called Fiber Fueled. Horrible time to launch a book, or actually maybe a wonderful time to launch a book.
I mean, right. I mean, well, first of all, what month are we talking? Did you say?
So it's May. So the world is kind of shut down.
So we're in the thick of it here.
We're in the thick of it. And the world is shut down. People are like at home and they're looking for something to do. Some people start making sourdough. Some other people say, I want to read a good book. And the hard part for me was that like my entire PR calendar was completely decimated by COVID.
Oh, right, because you're booked to do appearances and talks, and now that's all gone.
Yeah, I was like scheduled to go on the Rich Roll podcast, which was going to be the gemstone of my PR strategy, and it got canceled.
Right, because he was doing a lot of it in person, and maybe still does.
He was 100% in person. He had never done a remote episode.
Yeah.
He had a certain number of episodes that he had like a backlog that lasted him I think at least a couple months. Mm-hmm. And then like you can do editing tricks, hey, we're going to do a special episode on some topic, edit things together.
Right.
But actually it got to a point where he and I ended up having to do it remote. I'm one of the only Rich Roll episodes that was done remote in the last, 10 years.
Wow. And he went back to in studio when
he went back
got
to
back
in studio only.
Yeah.
So like everyone goes to LA to record with Rich, but I
fascinating
recorded with him remotely. So anyway, though the point is that like basically like my book comes out and my expectation is like the hard work is done. I get to, this was a thing. I felt compelled to write a book. All right, here it is. You can enjoy it if you want to enjoy it. I'm moving on. I'm a gastroenterologist. Mm-hmm. The problem is like people are banging my door down. My email is getting lit up on a daily basis. I could easily spend 2 to 3 hours a day on email alone.
Sure.
Right. And new opportunities. Hey, do you want to go on this podcast? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? And it got to a point where I felt like I was working 2 jobs. I was working 2 jobs.
Yeah.
And it was highly unsustainable. And I sat there and I said...
And being a dad.
That's the point. It's like, basically, here's 3 things. My career as a community gastroenterologist in Charleston, South Carolina, where I've worked very hard to build a good reputation for myself, and I could continue to do that.
Yeah.
My life as an author, where it's completely different. It's outside the box in the sense that this is not one-on-one conventional care. This is me taking that care that I would provide to a patient and figuring out ways to disseminate it more broadly on scale.
Yeah.
And then the third is my family and my kids. And at that time I had 2 kids. Now I'm up to 4 kids. So like to me, it was like, okay, I'm not going to sacrifice my family. That is my true legacy.
Right.
So we're going to protect that. Mm-hmm. So now I have to make a choice between these 2 things.
Yeah.
And many people, they're like, wow, that's so scary. How could you possibly do that? Well, I can always go back and be a gastroenterologist.
Ooh, interesting. Oh, so that's a great...
Wasn't that scary to me? Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And this leads me to another thought I had about this conversation, which is like, from a like impact point of view and a personal, professional satisfaction point of view, like sitting down with a patient face to face and helping them in a nuanced and complex way can radically change that person's life. And that must be, that is what doctors, I imagine, aspire to do. Like that is the purpose of their work, right?
100%.
Like that's why they do it. And then, and on the flip side, you're communicating to tens of thousands / millions of people. And maybe you're giving 1 million people one bit of bite-sized advice, or maybe you're giving 350,000 people who bought the book a really good roadmap for health. But those individuals were not necessarily like I'm sure people have written to you saying, "Oh, you changed my life," and I'm sure that's happening. But you know what I'm getting at? Is like one is literally I'm here with you and we are changing lives, and one is more abstract,
Totally.
right?
Yeah. So the question is, do you want to make a profound impact that you can see with your own eyes?
Yes.
For a few thousand people, because that's the amount that I can handle on a yearly basis, a few thousand people. Or do I want to do something that some people are going to consume it barely at all,
Right.
but some people are going to sit down and read your book? And that to me is like actually the part that makes this dream come true.
Mm-hmm.
That part. Because if a person is willing to give you their time, like this is to me not a financial transaction. I make $2.50 per book. Okay?
Right.
So I will gladly give up the $2.50 and accept that you are giving me a weekend where you are listening and like basically having a conversation with me. And these things that I've learned and worked so hard to like bring into my life, I want to share them with you. And then you get to decide how you apply that to your own life. And for every single person, that's different. But this book has been translated into, I don't know, 16 or 18 languages, like across the globe, right? And there are these moments I miss what you're describing, Matt. I miss that one-on-one interaction where you guide a person to success. I was really good at that. It was hard to walk away from that. But I now have these moments where I will be walking through LaGuardia and a person calls out my name and I turn and they're crying.
Oh.
And they tell me how my book helped them in their darkest hour. And so I still get that. It's just different.
Yeah. That's beautiful. That's powerful. In the time we have left, we've talked a lot about your journey, which is what the show is about. But can you share some basics on your philosophy around gut health, diet, fiber? You know, like I'm familiar with your work from listening to it over many years, but if you're going to give folks a snapshot of what they would find on your Instagram or other channels, how would you communicate that to folks listening now?
Sure. So I would say like the thesis simplified into 3 key points is this. Number 1, our gut microbiome, which I'll explain what that is deeply embedded in our health throughout our entire body. Mm-hmm. So the microbiome refers to invisible microorganisms. We can't see them with the naked eye. But if you had a microscope, you would see them. And they are as alive as you and I are. And the number that we have is staggering. So we have, as humans, about 30 trillion human cells. And yet our gut microbiome, which is where most of these microorganisms live, inside the large intestine, is 38 trillion. So we are less than 50% human.
There are more individual microorganisms in our body, in our intestine, our gastrotract, than the number of cells that make up the body itself.
The entire body. That is correct.
It's wild.
Yeah.
And even just starting from here, I'm so glad you are, because again, I think this stuff is mind-blowing. We don't really learn about it from a basic health and wellness science point of view, biology. I don't remember any of this from school. You know what I mean?
So, and I think the reason for that comes back to a point that you made very early in our conversation today, which is you talked about specialization. And I said, we have to specialize because it's so complex. Mm-hmm. So we have to become experts on something specific. And the problem is that, in fact, the way that our body works is interconnected.
Yeah.
And so there's no separation. The heart is affected by the brain, is affected by the gut, is affected by the liver. But at the center of this, what I would argue is the command center for our health are, believe it or not, these gut microbes.
Yeah.
That aren't even human,
Right.
and technically are not a part of our body. They're residents. They live with us. But they connect, Matt, to not only our digestion and our ability to like process and absorb the nutrients that our body needs to be healthy. Yes, they're like powerfully a part of that. But they're also connected to our metabolism and our immune system and our hormones and our brain in a way where it affects our mood and our cognition. And so you take a step back and you realize, like, hold on, we're dealing with metabolic issues. We're dealing with autoimmune issues, inflammatory issues. We're dealing with hormonal issues, challenges, mood disorders. Anxiety, you see these things that are emerging, in our society. They're like, we can all see this.
Because we think of the brain as the command center. So if I'm depressed or anxious, I need to treat the brain because that's where those feelings come from. But it's revolutionary to think about it as like, wait a minute, the chemicals that these creatures in my gut are emitting are the things that would affect how I feel and my general health.
That's right. And we call this the gut-brain connection. And that's just one example of the interconnectedness of our body. Because, we as humans, we want to think linearly. So we want to be able to see, if I do this, it does this. And so we have to actually, with this, we have to zoom out and see this broader picture, which starts with the gut microbes and the work that they do when they interact with what we eat or how we live. And then the effect that can have throughout our entire body, including traveling, like chemicals traveling from the gut to the brain, affecting our mood. So now this is not, by the way, just to be totally clear, this is not a claim that the only thing that matters, right? This is not to claim that there's no such thing as genetics.
Of course.
These things do exist. But that brings me to point number 2. So point number 1 is like, we have this thing that's not even human, that's so powerfully connected to whole body, total body health.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you. It just makes me think differently about nature, because you think about symbiosis of like, oh, this fish is attached to this larger fish and it eats the dirt off the fish. Like we know about symbiotic animal relationships, but like the idea that humans and probably other mammals wouldn't really function without other creatures, wouldn't function well or would get sick without other creatures doing their own thing inside their bodies or on their body, like that, it makes me think differently about biology and ecology, broadly speaking.
Our intelligence has made us elitist as a species.
Yes, that's well said.
So we think that we're so superior that we have no connection to our environment,
and that the environment is ours to harvest rather than a self-sustaining.
That's absolutely true.
That keeps us healthy.
Well, and in fact, that fallacy is where we create problems for ourselves.
Yes,
because we believe we have a God complex that makes us believe that we can manipulate our environment for the better because we think we're so smart that we know better than nature.
Right.
This is not an argument that nature is always right. That's not what I'm saying.
No, let me be clear. Nature's horrible. Nature wants to kill you all the time.
Right. Nature is brutal. Nature is absolutely brutal. Yes. Right. But at the same time, there's a balance that naturally exists in nature. And there is an environment that we came up in and that we are genetically pre-programmed for.
Yes.
That was disrupted by us, by our choices when we industrialized our diet and, all these different things that we did to change our lifestyle, where the way that you and I live is radically different than the way that our grandparents came up. And that wasn't that long ago.
Right. Yeah. Yes. The world is remade every generation now. And for millions of years, it was not. So I love talking about this and I'm very fascinated. So point number 2.
Point number 2 is
derail you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. The point number 2 is that this is adaptable. All right. So actually, this is empowering. I want the listeners to hear you are not like stuck. The choices that we make, let me say, there's a number of levers that you have the option to pull that can improve the health of this gut microbiome. And when you improve the health of your gut microbiome, this will create a ripple effect of health throughout the entire body. Or I like to think about it as rising the tide on your health.
Mm-hmm.
All these different buoys, they're all coming up at the same time, even though you had your eye on that one buoy. You're like, I got to raise that one. Okay, but you're going to be raising all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the levers that we pull, I would argue that the most powerful one is the food that we choose to eat. Mm-hmm. But the science says that the choices that we make today will start to manipulate and change and transform our microbiome by tomorrow. So this is a wonderful opportunity for us. This is not about perfection. Mm-hmm. This is about making small, sustainable choices that level up your overall diet and simultaneously allow you to tap into these things that your body was genetically pre-programmed for,
right,
such as the need to move, such as the need to spend outdoors, time outdoors, to be exposed to the sun, to be connected to other humans and have community, right? These are things that we are like clearly pre-programmed for.
Man, I'm striking out on a lot of these categories right now. In my line of work, in my neck of the woods, we were joking earlier about how the weather's been so crappy, so I haven't seen the sun in too long, and I sit at a desk and podcast for a living, so it's I need to do better.
Well, we can grab one of those guitars off the back right there, and we can get some people in this room, and we can have a good time, and then you'll be feeling better, Matt.
Great.
So those connections, there's actually some interesting stuff that has to do with, like, for example, music. Like, why does music make us feel good?
Yeah.
And it turns out that music activates the parasympathetic nervous system. Mm-hmm. And when we activate the parasympathetic nervous system, actually, it's really good for our gut microbiome.
Wow. Yeah.
So, and that's just like one example.
We were thinking about it like, feed the gut microbiome with diet, which then improves the brain, but then it's a two-way street.
It is a two-way street. There are these connections that go both ways, but also the other thing to bear in mind is that, yes, two-way street in the sense that, let me unpack what you just said for a quick moment. There are ways in which our emotional state and, other things such as like exposures or trauma have a massive impact on our gut health.
Yeah.
So it's something for us to understand. Not trauma is not something that applies to everyone. Not everything that exists that's bad is trauma, right? Trauma is something where we are actually completely overwhelming our nervous system's ability to adapt. And then therefore it lingers and sticks with us. Right. That's a different thing than I had to do something that was hard or it didn't feel good.
Yeah.
But that being said, though, all of these different inputs, they are there and they are influencing our gut. So yes, our gut influences our mood, but also our emotional state influences our gut. And so, all these different levers, it's not just diet. It's also things that have nothing to do with what you eat. Sleep and exercise and time outdoors and time with others and emotional balance and spirituality, all these things to me all ultimately feed into this ecosystem that lives inside of us. So the beauty of it is, point number 2 is that we have control. We have agency over this community of microorganisms, and we have ignored them. We don't need to ignore them anymore. Science allows us to see them and to understand them and to understand the opportunities for positive, mutually beneficial manipulation that can lead to better health.
Yeah, I love it.
So, all right.
Is there? So,
point number 3.
What is there? There is a 3. Yeah,
there's a 3. And I'll keep it pretty simple. The number one thing when it comes to our diet turns out to be the thing that we are missing the most. And that is the consumption of fiber in our diet. So fiber, we hear this and you think of, that's the orange drink that made grandma poop. And that is true. But actually, fiber is this nutrient that exists in all plant-based foods. So all fruits, vegetables, whole grain, seeds, nuts, legumes, spices, herbs, they all have fiber. And our human body lacks the ability on its own to process and digest fiber, which means that the fiber stays chemically unchanged between your stomach and your large intestine is exactly the same. And then it arrives in the colon, which is where these 38 trillion microorganisms live. And it turns out where we lack the enzymes, they have literally, Matt, there's estimates that they have 60,000 unique digestive enzymes.
I just want to put a pin on, put a bow on how mind-blowing this is. We can't even eat our own food unless we have these creatures digesting it for us.
It's very true. And
it's wild.
So they actually take this fiber. This becomes their culinary treat. Like this is their preferred meal of anything out there. And when they eat it, in the same way that if we have a delicious meal, it empowers us. It makes us stronger. It makes us more capable to do work. You have just empowered your microbes. They're more capable of doing work. And they're not only they're going to start literally right now, because what they're going to do is they're going to take this fiber and it's going to stop being fiber. They're going to transform it into what are called the short chain fatty acids. And these short chain fatty acids, Matt, you have now heard my resume. You've now heard how much time I've spent thinking about these things. And I am telling you, the listener, that of all of the things that I've ever come across in the entirety of my career, these are the most anti-inflammatory thing that I have ever found. And they have healing effects on your digestion, your metabolism, your immune system, your hormones, your mood, and your brain health. So here we are, and 95% of America is deficient in fiber. This is our most pressing deficiency. And no one is talking about it.
Right.
Why? Because fiber is not sexy. Well, I'm here to say, actually, I disagree with that statement. Fiber is sexy.
It can be. It can be
because
fun and
health
delicious.
is sexy. Well, because health is sexy, right? Like empowering your health through dietary choices. I'm not talking about eating cardboard. I'm talking about delicious, colorful food that can come in different forms and textures, different flavor profiles. And I'm talking about eating in a way that satisfies you, the individual, not the way that I eat, the way that you want to eat.
Yeah, it's not I know this from subscribing to your work. It's not a one size fits all. It is a very much like everyone is different and everyone has different preferences, and everyone's gut microbiome is unique, like fingerprint like, in a lot of ways.
That's right. So if we were to address this one issue, though, where we address the fiber deficiency, the fiber gap, I'm of the belief that we would radically transform the health of our country. Like, to me, not to open up another can of worms here, but like this whole MAHA movement. All right.
Wait, what is that?
So Make America Healthy Again.
Oh, I see.
So this is like RFK Jr.'s platform.
Oh, okay. I hadn't even heard that. All right.
So like I understand, like there's definitely people feel based upon your political beliefs, you have feelings that are associated with this. Let's sort of put that to the side for a moment, and let's all mutually agree. America is not healthy.
Right.
We need to be healthier. Right. The choices that are made are really important. So if we're going to make choices that lead to better health outcomes, we have to be smart. It's not just like do it different. No, different could be worse. Let's be smart. And if I were to like make my pitch would be the number one thing is to address this fiber deficiency in America. Because if we do this, we will have less heart disease, we will have less cancer, we will have less diabetes, we will have less strokes, we will have less Alzheimer's, we will have less chronic kidney disease. That's 6 of the top 10 causes of death, and I have the data to back me up on that.
It's powerful. It's very thought-provoking. And that leads me to my final question, because I do have to let you go. You've laid it out here. We know how much medical school you've gone to, and we know how credentialed you are, but we cover media literacy deeply on this show. And my final question is like, how do you convince people to believe you? Why should I believe you? I'm saying that rhetorically, of course, but like there is so much medical misinformation, and your premise here is quite unique. And like, I know it's gaining traction, but like to a layperson, if I didn't know you or know you through other credible sources, I might think you were a woo-woo guy on Instagram. How do you convince me that this is the real deal? You know what I mean?
Yeah. There has to be a source of truth. And within what I do, the source of truth is published medical literature.
Yep.
And the ability to refer to specific studies to back up your assertions. So I think it starts there. Now, don't get me wrong. This could absolutely, what I just said, could be manipulated and used against me.
Sure.
Right? Like it can get, a person can manipulate and find that one study that goes against 10,000 studies. Right? But I think at the end of the day, it starts with this, a commitment to science and the scientific process. And I also think that, like, as you sit there, there's a transition that's taken place where 25 years ago, prior to like the high-powered internet that we now all have access to, you trusted your doctor, and it was a very paternalistic relationship. You didn't have access to the information. You just went. They told you what to do, and you did it. And where we are now is we all have access to an excessive amount of information. So this puts us in a radically different position, like where it can actually be much better for us, I think, because we do have the option now to get access to experts,
right,
and hear what they're saying. But the tricky part is you have to identify who those people are.
Who is an expert. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. My primary care doctor, I went for a physical recently. He literally said, because maybe he asked what I did for a living, and I mentioned what I do. And he's like, yeah, my job used to be telling patients what to do. And now I just tell people what information is accurate.
Right.
And it's exactly what you're saying. And he's an older guy, and he's gone through that transition. I was like, whoa, that's crazy. Yeah. That's radical.
Yeah, it is. So it's radical, and it's there's pitfalls all over the place. There's a lot of traps that exist. There's some people who are really good at sort of making things sound good. And I guess where I come in is that I see this as, look, my job is I'm taking everything that I've learned and this dream that I had when I was 18 years old to be a medical doctor, and I'm channeling that energy in a direction that I never expected I actually would. But like, my job is ultimately to maintain the same goals. If I were working with a patient in the clinic, my goal is to help you to achieve better health outcomes. I may not be one-on-one with you, but I'm still helping you to achieve better health outcomes. And that's my orientation and mission. And you will know that because if I'm like purely agenda driven, you will be able to predict what I'm going to say before I actually say it. Mm-hmm. But when I am data-driven, then I will be able to turn to the study, and you will hear that evolve as the data evolves, because the data always evolves.
Exactly. Yep. It's well said. I think we're going to leave it there. Dr. Will Bulsiewicz, thank you so much for being my guest on Influence. It's a pleasure to talk with you and getting to know you, and I always learn a lot from what you do.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking a few moments to listen to us.
I cannot overstate how dicey and complicated it is to recommend medical and health and wellness influencers these days on ye old internet. But I assure you that Dr. B, Will, is the real deal. As you've heard, just truly, he's devoted his entire life to this expertise, and he is so passionate and committed to bringing it to as many people as possible and changing folks' lives. And as I said at the top of the show, have I turned into a vegan? No, I don't think I could ever do that. But do I think differently about the foods that I eat and give to my children? 100%. And it's not, it's not hard. It's just rethinking some things and thinking evolutionarily and scientifically about, again, geez Louise, the bugs you can't even eat your own food without these little bugs doing what they do. inside your body. Makes me think big about nature and the world and ecology and symbiosis, as we discussed. So if you like thinking big thoughts and thinking about these sorts of things, you're in the right place. You're in the right company. Please subscribe to all of Will's things. Links are in the doobly-doo, the book, his Instagram, and there might be some projects coming down the pike that we did not talk about here. So stay tuned for that. And of course, I must remind you to be kind. Rewind your podcasts after listening to them, and I will talk at you in 1 to 2 weeks' time.